The title of this workshop is Impact on Learning, and I'll unpick that in a minute. Before I do, I'm aware that we have a mixture of nationalities in this room. Put your hands up, please, if you are, like me, British. Okay, about half. Portuguese? More? Okay. From somewhere else? Okay, let's just quickly see where you're from. Australia? Okay, German American, thank you. South African. Oh, of course, South African too, yes. Any missing? Venezuela, thank you. Canada, excellent. Belgium. Belgium too. Okay, wonderful. So we've got a real mix in here. I'm going to do it in English. If there's anybody whose English is, or you're struggling to understand me, and bearing in mind I am from Liverpool as well, so I'm sorry if I think I've lost my accent now over the years. But if you don't understand, please, if there's somebody on the table that could just translate, that would be great. Okay. Let's get going. Before we do anything at all, I'm here to talk about making us the best version of ourselves as we possibly can. And that means having the best teachers in the best schools. But what do we mean by great teachers and great teaching? This question has actually been researched with children. But rather than asking the children, I'd just like you, just for 1 minute, and it's literally 1 minute because we've got a lot to get through today. So I'm sorry in advance for cutting your discussions short, but you've only got 60 seconds just to come up with on your tables maybe 2 or 3 words that you would use to define the characteristics of a great teacher. I've put 8 there. I'm sure we can come up with 8 words between us. And Claire, maybe because you're next to me, if you wouldn't mind, once we get the feedback, if you just list the... I just want, well, I've started that off. A great teacher, you might say a great teacher is, and then it might be whatever the word you describe, or a great teacher has, or what a great teacher does. But you've only got 60 seconds to come up with some words. You can write on the boards, yeah? Okay, off you go. Okay, you've had 30 seconds. Got 30 seconds left. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, if I can bring you back. You know, when you teach, because I'm a teacher as well, and I've been teaching for, I don't have my own students, unfortunately, anymore, but for 25 years I've been in teaching. And I used a range of strategies to try to get the children to listen to me when they were busy working. And you must have them as well, from, are you listening, are you listening? Have you done that one? Do you know the reply? No one knows? Last year in our global conference, I tried that with the head teachers, and they weren't listening to me, and I said, are you listening, are you listening? And then no one took any notice of me, and then there was one voice in the corner that went, yes, I am, yes, I am. The answer is yes, we are. I'm not going to do that with you today unless you really want me to, but you must have a better way. What do you do? Raise your hands. So if I put my hand up, everybody puts their hands up. Should we do that? Should we do that today? Okay, let's do that one. Okay, so Claire, are you ready? Very quickly, let's just get some words or phrases to describe great teachers. If I can start on this table, please. Just one word. Okay, that's 3, thank you. Inspiring. Okay, but okay, they're all good words, aren't they? Let's take all three. Inspiring, enthusiasm, empathy. Thank you. And this table. Caring is a new one. Okay. Reliable. Caring and reliable. I'll take those. Any other different words that we haven't had? This table. A friend. Thank you. Okay. Lauren Wynn's table. Creative. Thank you. Don't be impressed by me knowing your name was Lauren Wynn, by the way. Creative. Okay. Patricia's table. Encouraging. Great word. Thank you. Positive. Is it you said? Positive. Sensitive. Sorry, I missed that. Approachable. Thank you. This table? Passionate, fair, good listener. And the last table here, if you could share something with us, is there anything that that we haven't mentioned yet? Sense of humor. Fun. Okay. Good role model. Great words. We're going to come back to that later because, as I said, this was something that was researched with children. And at the end of this afternoon session, I'll share with you what they said. Okay? So for today, and Nobel is so well organized that you have your own folders. That doesn't normally happen, by the way, when I do workshops. But in a sense, it's so well organized that actually I don't want you to look inside because I'm going to be doing an activity and you might find the answers in there. Now, some of you have probably looked inside, I know. It's like getting a birthday present, isn't it? You've got to open it. But basically, you'll have in there, when you actually start reading them, a whole range of things. But for now, I just need to make sure that you've got a green card and a red card. Does anybody not have one? Great. Please don't write on them or rip them up. And that sounds awful, but it has happened in workshops in the past where I haven't got them back because I'll use them again. And you should also have a whiteboard with a pen and something to rub out with. And if you don't have something to rub out with, maybe a finger to rub out with. Okay. And the others are worksheets and things that we're going to use during the session. Here is what I would like to happen in this session, and I will ask you at the end whether you think we have been successful or not. So first of all, we're going to talk about learning, and I would like to share with you what the research is telling us about effective teachers and effective schools on students' learning. Of course, learning is why they're here. You could argue that children come to school for more than learning or more than academic learning, and that's true. They come to school for all sorts of reasons, social reasons, relationship reasons, but they're here to learn. And so the focus of today's workshop is their achievement in class, if that makes sense. Yeah, how well they manage to learn. So we're going to look at the research. Secondly, we're going to focus on what the research says are successful impact strategies. So we're going to look at what the research says works well in the classroom. And thirdly, and most importantly, I hope that today's session will give you a chance to reflect on you, yourself as a teacher, and also to share practical ideas between us so that we can all have more impact on our students' learning. Okay? So that's the idea. When I used to go to workshops as a teacher, I always felt I was wasting my time unless I could take something away with me that I could use in my own lessons. And so I hope that you'll get that today. A few disclaimers now. This is so what I really I'd like to say up front, in case you thought otherwise. So I've talked I've said that the focus of this workshop is learning. That's why we're here. It is based on research. So everything I'm going to talk about today is based in good scientific research. However, as we all have experiences in the classroom, I'm going to share with you a lot of personal experiences that I've found as a teacher, and I'm going to ask you to share your experiences as a teacher as well. Sometimes when I do these workshops, because I will be asking you for feedback at the end, and I get comments like, I feel, as a primary teacher, I feel it was more secondary based. Or in the same workshop, as a secondary teacher, I feel it was kind of primary based. Or an early years teacher might say, I don't think it was relevant for early years, but then the older ones will say, I think it was more relevant for early years. And that's because I have deliberately used a range of examples from the very earliest learners, from the early years, all the way up to the oldest students, the 18-year-olds, and I would argue university level too. I've had university lecturers come to my workshops and said, I'm going to use that at university, some of these ideas. So I don't think it's age specific at all, but the examples, of course, you'll see children of different ages. And it's not subject specific. So it's not a science workshop, and it's not a maths workshop, and it's not a languages workshop. It's about learning. It's about how we learn. Okay? So because of that, I would like you to really think about how you can adapt it to your own reality, to your own context. And a lot of what you're going to see today, you already know, I'm sure. And lots of the things that we're going to look at, the practical ideas you're going to see today, I'm sure lots of you already use them. But see it as a refresher in that case. And if some of them aren't relevant to you, and some of them won't be, maybe you could think, well, okay, this isn't relevant, but I could change it and modify it to make it relevant in this way. Okay? And finally, very important, nobody has the answers to teaching. Once, not so long ago, my boss, Sergio Gonzalez, the CEO of what is now Globe Educate, he said to me, but Daniel, just tell me the method to teach maths, because there's so many methods out there. Tell me the best one. I said, well, there's lots of good ones. Yeah, it's true. And there's people talk about Singapore maths, and they look at China, but who are we talking about? Show me the students. So what do you mean? I said, well, students are different, aren't they? Ages are different, teachers are different. There's no one answer. There's no one way to teach. And we've got to be really careful to say that, I think. There are many ways to teach effectively. No one has the answers. And if anyone thinks they do have the answers, in my opinion, they shouldn't be teaching. Because what you do day after day is so complex to get the best out of every child at every moment in the day, whether it's first thing in the morning, last thing in the afternoon, on a sunny day, hot day, on a windy day. What happens on windy days? Kids go crazy on windy days, even worse than rainy days. And rainy and windy days, well, forget teaching, crowd control. Nobody has all those answers, and things happen. What would happen now if suddenly the electricity went off? Hopefully it won't. Don't know if that happens in Nobel, but if it does, then we have to be resourceful, don't we? And children are all different. They learn at different rates. They learn in different ways. And so nobody has all the answers. But what we do know is that there is research based on, and we know there are some things that maybe we should try and avoid. Okay? Now, you don't need to do this because, again, Nobel being the organized school that it is, it's already happened, which is putting you into groups with a diversity of different people. So we'll move on from that, but maybe this afternoon I might mix you up so you can talk to some new people. Okay? Shh, don't say anything, because I've got a question coming up here. I think this character is probably familiar to most of you, but maybe not all of you. So very quickly, don't tell anybody the answer, but if you know the name of this character, could you just hold up a green card? And if you don't know the name, could you hold up a red card? And the more I do this activity, the more green I tend to get. So I think this character is becoming more and more world famous. But I'm looking around the tables now, and I'm just going to try to remember the tables that are all green. And you can do the same if you'd like to. The tables that are all green. We've got 1, 2, we've got another one, 3, 4. We've got 4 all green tables. And now the tables that are mixed green and red, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, wonderful. Don't tell them the answer, okay? It's a very important test. You might think this has nothing to do with learning. All will be revealed by the end of the day. Okay, so I'm going to start today's workshop with research, looking at some research, while I've still got you fresh. So let's look at some different types of research that have been done on learning. Here's one, and you might challenge this, but according to the research from the University of Michigan in 2017, they looked at 3 influences on children's learning. They looked at the influence of the school that they go to. They looked at the influence of the teacher or teachers that the child has. And they also looked at the impact of the type of parent that the child has. And I'm going to give you 10 seconds, and you don't have to agree on your tables, but just to tell me 1, 2, 3. Which one do you think came out on top in terms of having the most influence on a child's attitude to learning? Which was second, and which was third? They're all important. They're all important. Okay, you've got 10 seconds to think. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Maybe a whistle. It's not working, is it? I don't think the hand's not working. Maybe the "Are you listening?" I need to try again. Okay. Very quickly, let me just ask somebody randomly. Let me ask Pedro. Pedro, what do you think? Okay. Thank you. Would anybody disagree? Anyone had a different order? Yeah. What's your name? Nadia. Okay. And is there another one that anybody would like to come up with? Rita? Parents, teachers, school. Okay. Hands up if you agree with Rita. Okay. Well, Tricia Ballard agrees with you because that's what she came up with as well. That the parents of a child have the strongest influence on learning. Now, that's not to say, of course, that if you have a child that doesn't have supportive parents that will help them to learn, that they can't learn well. Because if you give them the right conditions in school, then they still can. But according to Tricia Ballard, number 1 was the parents. Of course, the parents decide on the school normally, often as well. And then let's look at school and teacher. Well, before I answer that, let me show you this. This is a clue to the answer. I saw this back in 2016, 11th of June. And it's The Economist magazine. I don't know if you know The Economist. Have you seen it before? It's a financial magazine, nothing to do with education normally. And it's not something that I would be normally reading either. But then I saw this front cover, and it said, "How to make a good teacher." I don't know why The Economist decided to focus on education, but they did. And basically, it talks about how teachers can become more effective through training. And it also said this phrase here, which I love. A school's most important pupils are the teachers themselves. Now, when I tell parents that, I say, well, actually, the teachers are the most important pupils in the school. They look at me horrified, and they say, what do you mean? The teachers aren't more important than the children? So I didn't say they were more important than the children. I said that the most important pupils learners are the teachers, because in my opinion, I agree with this, we should all be learning all the time. And if we can learn effectively, we can have a direct impact on the children. So the children benefit from that. So, okay, fine. So, the research does back this up. Let me just flick through some research. This is fairly obvious, I think. If you are a student with an effective teacher, you're likely to learn, about 3 times as much as if you're with an ineffective teacher. That doesn't surprise me at all. More interestingly, maybe for today, let me show you these. This was some research done into the effective schools and effective teachers. So they've compared here from 1 to 100, 100 being top, 1 being bottom, how much learning happens when a child is in a highly effective school but ends up with the least effective teacher. So the worst learning in a good school. And they found that it's significantly higher than if you are with the worst teacher in the worst school. Again, probably not a surprise. Interestingly, the other way round, if you go to schools that are considered to be ineffective, but you have the most effective teacher in that bad school, they found that the learning was, almost double in terms of student achievement. In other words, the teacher matters more than the school. The school matters as well. Of course, we don't want to be in that kind of school or teach with that kind of teacher. We're aiming, and I think we're there, and well done, by the way, on your on the academic results this year, which I've seen, because Nobel's done incredibly well. So, and I know we've got mainly primary teachers here this morning. That's down to you. I used to say that as a head teacher, when the secondary teachers were taking all the credit for the excellent examination results. Said no, that started in the early years. So well done, early years teachers, because they had a huge impact on the students. If we have effective schools and effective teachers, then we're in the top 4% of learning, and that's what we're aiming for. Okay. Here's 3 more. I won't read them. I'll let you read them yourselves. Okay, so these are different pieces of research, and they're all saying similar things. So before we go into talking about teachers and what is effective in the classroom, I wanted to just very quickly to touch on what do we mean by an effective school, because I've used that phrase already today. And what are we doing? Well, let me share with you research by a guy called Alistair Smith, who's written lots of books on school leadership and management. And I've come up with his top 10 list, which I've kind of paraphrased. And I put in italics there some keywords. So you've got learning. In good schools, the focus is on learning. They talk about how students learn. When you go to a meeting, quite often it'll be, well, more often than not, it should be about learning, about discussing, debating how we teach and how the students learn. Whereas in lots of schools, the meetings tend to be about calendars and schedules and logistics and things like that. And quite often the most important thing, which is how the children are learning, is ignored in meetings. And yet you're all there together, like we are today, and then we can talk about it. The basics are in place. So we have good timetables, and we have classrooms, and we have students, and we have teachers, and we have resources. All the basics are in place. Sounds obvious. Isn't always the case in schools. What happens when people are sick? What happens when things don't arrive on time? Things like that. Number 3, it's less about a performance in the classroom, and it's more about looking at learning in the classroom. When I learned to be a teacher in the very early 90s, I was a secondary modern languages teacher. And I was taught that I had to sing and dance, use flashcards, play games, and do all these engaging activities with the students. And at no point did they ever talk about how much they learn. And it was more about that I had to do a show. And by the end of the first week, I was exhausted, because if I was doing a show all day, every day, I was doing all the work and the students were doing nothing. They might have had a nice time at first, but now, of course, we know that that's not effective teaching. What is effective is looking at how well the learning is going on the tables, because if they're not learning well, then the teaching is not good either. So looking at learning. For that, we need high-quality teachers. So we need to find good quality teachers. We need to recruit them, but we also need to retain them. We don't want our best teachers to leave and go somewhere else. We focus on people. We talk about the people in the school. We create effective teams. We have policies which are clear to back us up on what we do. We have a plan. We have a plan, which is normally shared with the staff. So the staff know the plan. What are we doing to improve? We have leaders around the school, and they are visible. They're here, and they help to inspire. But where the real magic in schools happens, in my opinion, is in the next one, number 8. And that is where the teachers and everybody else in the school are supporting each other, where we can work together. And we might challenge each other. And that's where really we can become effective. We know what's going on because we monitor what's happening. And we collect data, but useful data, so that we know that we're doing a good job, or if we're not doing a good job, we know what we need to improve. So if nothing else, I would say these are the kind of 4 main words that came up in that. And for the purpose of today, I'd like to look at unpick learning and, of course, talk about people. Also processes and data, but particularly learning and people. Another piece of research says that the leadership of the school, the senior leaders, is the second biggest factor in a school after the teacher. And I'm sure that's correct. If a school's doing really well, it's normally because the senior leadership team are doing a good job. If the school's doing badly, it's because the senior leadership team are not doing a good job. At the end of the day, they are responsible for the school. So here is our new logo. I'm sorry it's a bit blurred. I've kind of copied and pasted it from our new documents. What are we doing in our organization to make our schools more effective? I have a document which some of you will know called the Platinum Standard. It basically looks at different areas of school leadership and management. It looks at these. So number 1 is the leadership team. Number 2 is the teaching and the learning and the assessment. Number 3 is how much progress the pupils make. Number 4 is the well-being of the children in our schools. And number 5, it still refers to NATHE there, but within what is our mission and our value proposition, how well the school fits in. And I came here, I can't remember when it was now. Do you remember when I came? To February to do this, and I shared with Mike Farrer the findings. And each of those 5 areas I define into whether it's an exceptional school, a good school, a not yet good school, and that's an important wording, not yet good, not unsatisfactory, or not requires improvement, but not yet good, because we will become good if we're not there. We might be insufficient, we might be not yet good, we're going to try and be at least good. Satisfactory would be unsatisfactory. We don't want to be just average, we want to be at least good. And so for each of the areas, Mike has a report on each of them, and that helps us then to create a plan. And part of the plan is today's workshop, looking at how we learn. And you'll see some of these, we'll talk about some of these today. Okay, so that's happened. That was a reality. Let's go into teaching and teachers. That's why we're here today. Well, as I said at the start, an effective teacher promotes effective learning. Lots of work has been done into researching this. And have any of you heard of John Hattie? Hands up if you've heard of John Hattie. Can you raise your hand? A few of you. Okay, that's this guy here, John Hattie. He is Australian, from Melbourne. He works at the University of Melbourne. What he did was he has put together, collected all the research that has been done, all the different analyses, and created what he calls a meta-analysis for each one. Meta-analysis means taking all the research on the same topic, the same subject, and then looking at all of them together to create a meta-analysis. And he's done that with over 800 different influences on learning. So this is the biggest research that has ever been done on learning. If you're ever tired and you can't sleep at night and you've got insomnia, it's a very, very thick book. It's got very small writing. I would recommend it. It is interesting, but it does help you to sleep as well. So I'm not going to share too much of it. But as a first activity this morning, I would like us to look at least some of this. So I have categorized some of these analyses into high positive impact on learning, medium impact, which could be positive but also could be negative, and low impact, which doesn't seem to have much impact on the student's learning. So I'm going to share with you 11 of the things that John Hattie has researched. Now, let me explain them before you do this activity. So the first one I think is fairly obvious, which is, beg your pardon, let me go back. Setting inability groups. You understand that? So the idea of having like a more able group in one class, a less able group in another class, or even within the same class, a more able group, a second group, a third group, and putting the children in those groups to learn. Number 2, smaller class sizes. So the idea here is that the smaller the class, the more they learn. And certainly parents, is one of the when I get complaints, I get all the complaints that come from all the schools to Globe Educate, and one of the main ones I get is that the class sizes are too large. So what does the research tell us about class sizes? The third one, high student expectations. That means that the student themselves has a high expectation of themselves. They are setting the bar high for themselves. They are ambitious. They want to learn. They expect to do well, and they believe they can. They have good confidence, self-esteem. The fourth one, peer influence. The children's influence on each other in the classroom or in their learning. Yeah. The fifth one, questions, questioning techniques. So there are two things there. One is the quality of the questions we use, asking good questions. And secondly is how we use questions in the classroom, the way we ask questions to different children. So the techniques used to ask questions. Pupil feedback, that means the feedback that the child receives either from the teacher, from their friends, or from whoever, but the feedback they get on how they are doing at school, on their learning. Traditional, direct, teacher-led lessons. That means basically teaching from the front. You know, maybe more in a secondary setting where a teacher will give input, content, and the students will listen. And they might take notes, and they might ask questions, and the teacher might ask questions. So the traditional kind of teacher at the front lesson. Different learning styles. You're probably aware that lots of research has been done into what they call learning preferences. Whether you are more of a visual learner, or more of an auditory learner, or more of a kinesthetic learner where you like to do things. Apparently, I'm a visual learner. I like to see things written down. Well, what if we just gave the visual learners visual tasks, and we just gave the kinesthetic learners kinesthetic tasks, and we just gave the ones that like to listen listening tasks? Would they learn more by focusing just on their preferred style? That was the research. The next one I've called regular progress checks. I haven't used the word assessment on purpose or evaluation, but the idea of the teacher regularly checking up to see how each individual is doing. So I guess, again, typically maybe in secondary classrooms, there are some teachers that will only give them one assessment, which might be at the end of a unit of work or even at the end of the year. But this is regular progress check, so very often checking on how they're doing. Next one, engaging but challenging tasks. Engaging meaning motivational tasks, but challenging that has a level of difficulty which is challenging for the different children. And finally, specialist subject knowledge. Now, I think we're all primary teachers here. So if you're, how many of you teach maths? Okay, thank you. So how important is it that you are experts in maths? That's kind of the research. Is it more important to be an expert in your subject? Is that what creates good learning? Now, that will depend on the context, of course. If you are teaching maths at university and you don't know maths, then you're going to have a problem. But, and all of these depend on context. All of these could be debated, yeah? Okay, so what I'd like you to do, please, is I'll give you 5 minutes only. On your tables, I would like you to decide for each of these, which do you think in the research came out as having very, very strong impact on learning? Which ones maybe could be variable in their impact? And which ones do you think don't have much impact on learning according to the research? You might not agree with each other, that's fine. And we could talk about all of them probably all day. But I'm only going to give you 5 minutes. So just high, medium, or low. And you've got a copy of this in your folders. So if you can take the paper out of your folders. It should be in there somewhere, I think. No, it's not. Okay. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Last page. If you go straight to the last page, then. Okay, 5 minutes. It's 10:19 by my watch. Okay, so we'll stop at just before 25 past. Off you go. Could I just stop you for a minute, please? And just, could I just stop you for a second? Thank you. I'm a football fan. I'm from Liverpool. I've had a fantastic year. I was at the Champions League final. I've still got a smile on my face thinking about it. But here, and lots of you have picked up on this. You've got this kind of formation here, and that was because I'm a football fan, and there were 11 players, 11 influencers. I've just put them in a football formation. So I've got a 4-4-2. Can you see? But that's not the right answer. So lots of you are trying to get 2 at the top, 4 in the middle, 4 in defense, and 1 goalkeeper. Imagine you don't have a goalkeeper, and you could have 11 attackers if you wanted to. Okay? So please take no notice of that. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop, please. Okay, very good. Yeah, very impressive. I think that's the best I've ever had. People don't take no notice of me normally. I've got a couple of rebel tables, but I think we're mostly listening. Okay, we're going to have to move on because of a lack of time. So let's let's see let's see how closely you came up with the answers that the research is telling us. And as I said just before you started, each of these depends. It depends on the context. It depends on the age or the school or the subject. It depends on all of them. But these, remember, are the meta-analyses. This is putting all of the different researches together. Some research is conflicting, but if you put them all together, you get a trend, a pattern. Okay, I'm going to share with you 5 strong impacts. These are in the top 10 of all of the 800. I'm going to share with you some which could be variable, very good, very positive, and very negative. And I'm going to share with you those that don't appear to have much impact at all. Okay, so here we go. Number one of all of them. This is basically students feeling good about their learning, students being keen to learn, that we have managed to get them on like an upward cycle where they can't wait to learn. They are engrossed and engaged in their learning. They're loving it. They're confident. They've got good self-esteem. They think they can do it. Progress checks. We could call it kind of assessment. Assessment for learning is often something that you hear in the UK. Canada, you might hear assessment as learning, which is where you've got peers who are helping each other. But knowing how we're doing, yeah? Interestingly, very near the top is questions. And that's not something that I was really aware of until I started looking into it. Questioning, so important. And we'll look at that in a second. Maybe less surprising is that you are not giving them boring lessons, that they are interested, but not just interested because it might be fun, interested because of the level of challenge, that they are doing work at the right level for them to learn. And the final one was feedback. So if we don't tell our students how to improve, they're probably not going to. So I don't necessarily mean marking work, although marking would be part of feedback. You can mark work and have no impact, by the way, and we'll talk about that this afternoon. How to mark work and kill yourselves working and have no impact. That's not good. But when they get good feedback, it really helps. Yeah? If I was a football manager and I had my 11 players and I didn't tell them at any point how they should improve how they're playing, well then I'm not doing my job. Yeah? Okay, so they are our top 5, and they are going to be the 5 focus points of today's workshop, each of those. We're kind of almost going to go in reverse order. I'm going to finish this afternoon with the top one. Okay? Then, maybe this is a surprise, because teachers often put this right at the bottom. Again, I would imagine, well, in early years, it's probably not a very good idea to have teacher-led lessons. With 18-year-olds, it may be a good idea. But as I said at the start, there is no one right or wrong teaching style. And you've probably had some very inspirational, great teachers who were quite traditional in how they taught. Doesn't make them a bad teacher necessarily. What I would say is nobody can cope with 7 or 6 or however many hours of teaching our students get every day. If you have to listen for 7 hours every day and not really participate, then that's not good either. Yeah, no one can do that. I think we might struggle with 5 hours here. Hopefully it won't be teacher-led. A lot of it will be, I'm afraid. But there's nothing wrong with explaining something in front of a class. Even better if you can get the kids involved in it too. Okay, no surprise here, I think. children have a lot of influence on each other, very strong influence, but it could be very positive or it could be very negative. And I'm sure you've had that kind of experience as well, where if in good schools, in schools where learning is really happening, that has a tremendous impact, fantastic impact. In schools that are where the kids are not learning and they are disaffected, then actually the behavior and the influence of people in your classroom can be tremendously negative. This one, well, as I said, it depends. But the idea here is that you might be an expert in a subject, but not know how to teach. I've had teachers like that as a student. I have had teachers as a head teacher like that, and in the end, we've had to find another teacher because there was a lady that was one of my science teachers, and she had 2 PhDs, doctorates in biochemistry. I don't know why she had 2, but she did. She had 2, but she couldn't communicate with her students. She couldn't do it. So yes, it's important, of course, to know your stuff, but it's even more important to know how to connect and how to teach effectively, which is the focus of today. Interesting. Now, I'm sure we've all got our opinions on what the ideal class size is. And again, I'm sure it depends on your context. I wouldn't have an early years class of 100 with one teacher, I don't think. No. But the research shows us that actually it isn't demonstrated in the learning outcomes that having a smaller class leads necessarily to more learning. We might think it should. When I was teaching a few years ago, I was teaching A-level French. I speak French and Spanish, and I was teaching French. Quite weirdly, I was teaching in Spain. I live in Valencia, a beautiful place if you've never been there. I live in Valencia, and I was teaching in a British school. But they didn't want me speaking Spanish to the Spanish kids, of course, because I'm English. So I ended up teaching French, which is a bit weird, like an English guy teaching French to Spaniards. But it kind of worked. But I used to have, in my A-level classes, it was an option at the time. So I would typically have 4 or 5 students. Wonderful. We used to sit around a desk like this and had a fantastic time. And they did quite well. They used to get A's and B's and C's. Not much less than that. So, I was quite happy with them, with their performance. And then, after a couple of years, the school decided that French was going to be obligatory for every student. And I suddenly went from having class sizes of 4 to class sizes of 32. Awful. Because my marking at the weekend became so intensive. I'd spend every Sunday marking all the work. I wanted to make sure that I marked their work. And at the end of the year, they got their results. Some of them got A's. Some of them got B's. Some of them got C's. Almost exactly the same proportion as when I was teaching class sizes of 4. And then I thought to myself, Daniel, what have you done wrong? You're getting the same results with 32 as you were getting with 4. How badly were you teaching those 4? And then when I thought about it, I realized I'm doing the same things. I'm teaching in the same way. We're doing some speaking, we're doing some listening, we're doing some reading, we're doing some writing. I'm doing the same amount of marking for each student, but multiplied by 32 instead of by 4. I am working a lot harder. The kids are getting the same results. So it's less about the class size and more about what you do with them. So if you have a smaller class size and you can teach differently, then I can see that could have impact. Actually, in some places, the larger class sizes do better than the smaller ones. For example, maths in Shanghai is extremely, the children learn extremely well in maths in Shanghai, in China. And they have typically class sizes of between 40 and 50 students. Why? Well, because there's all sorts of other things going on in Shanghai, China. There's expectations on the students. There's a culture of effort and working hard. Most of them are traditional direct teacher-led lessons, by the way. But it kind of works. So it's less about the size of the class and more about other factors. Okay. Do you have a preferred class size? Yeah.
Also, why is not the mental health of the teacher included in this test then? I mean, it's all very well. If you didn't do the work in all your weekends, would you have had the same results? Why is that also not calculated in it? Because it's very important, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. And if you looked at, I guess it's different research, but looked at mental health of teachers in different settings, I'm sure that would be different. But in terms of the learning outcomes of the students, there's no real research to say what the ideal size is. Some teachers say to me sometimes they don't like small classes, too small. So I say to them, well, how small is too small? And they say, like 10. And I say, why not 10? They say, well, I prefer 15. So, well, why 15? So, well, because there's a better dynamic, more discussion maybe. Well, I say, well, what about 30? They say, no, not 30. And yet last week I was in Rome and I was doing this similar workshop to this, and there was one teacher, the primary teacher, said his ideal class size was 27. So I said, why? And he said, I like 27. So I'm sure we could probably do a better job with smaller classes if we changed how we teach. But typically teachers don't. Typically teachers have a style that they stick to, which is part of the focus of today. Okay, ability groups, interestingly, it probably can have a good impact on some students, and it could also have a negative impact on others. I don't know about you, and I don't know about I can't remember about Nobel how you separate students or whether you put them into ability groups or not. Let me share with you my own experience in the school where I was head teacher. My maths department in the secondary school had a set 1 and a set 2 and a set 3 and a set 4. Big school. And they had the top set, the second set, the third set, and the fourth set. And I used to get complaints from parents of children who were in the second set and the third set. Not so much the fourth set or the top set. The ones in the second set wanted to be in the top set. The ones in the third set wanted to be in the top set or the bottom set. It was almost like the bottom set was great for looking after the kids that were really struggling. The top set was the accelerated group. They were going fast in maths. And the ones in the middle, well, they were kind of frustrated. Even my daughter, who I know lots of you have met, who was here before the summer and had a wonderful time here, and thank you to all of you for making that happen. She's a very, very academic learner, and in year 7, they put her, when she came out of year 6, into the second set. That was a traumatic experience for my daughter, perfectionist that she is. She said, I hate maths. I said, why? She said, I'm in set 2. I said, well, that's not bad. Yeah, but I'm not good at maths. Maybe it's this expectations thing at the top. In her mind, she wasn't good, so she couldn't do it. So she didn't like it, so she didn't try. She gave up on maths. Actually, they put her in the top set in the end. They realized that she could do it, and then she was a lot happier about herself. What we did in the end was we changed from set 1, set 2, set 3, set 4, because when I asked the head of maths, how do you decide who goes in set 1 and who goes in set 2? How many are in set 1? She said to me, there are always 28 in set 1. I said, why? She said, because I have 28 chairs. I said, so we're not actually separating our students according to ability. We're separating them according to chairs. What if you had 29 chairs? Would you put another one in? No, it won't fit. So what if we got smaller desks? I don't have smaller desks. And so what they were doing was they were limiting 28, and those top 28 were on a different program to set 2. So no one from set 2 could ever really catch up. So we want them all to reach for the stars, all of our students. What we did in the end was, and it was true, we only had 28 spaces in the classrooms. We put them into mixed groups. Maths teachers hated me. And I said, right, you're going to teach in mixed ability groups. We decided together for 6 weeks only. And they all taught mixed groups. They were trying their best to differentiate and to have, it was very difficult for the teachers. But at the end of those 6 weeks, they gave them a test. And based on that one test, for the next 2 weeks, we put them into ability groups based on that assessment. Just for 2 weeks. And the ones that had done very well on the test, who had learned it really well, they did like extension projects. We had 2 groups of that. There was one group that hadn't really learned that well, and they were retaught some of the content that they hadn't got. And then we had the kids that were all over the place, and they were retaught as well, and given a slightly adapted test for 2 weeks. And then it started again. They went back to their original teachers. And we did that all the time. We found that performance rose across the board. Every single group performed better. And every time they did a test, those top groups were different. And we found in maths that actually, when we gave them a geometry test, the strongest students were not the same students as when we gave them an algebra test, which I guess they're different skills. And that meant that everybody could end up in the top set, or everybody could get support if they needed it. It worked really well. So just sharing that with you. Okay, and finally, there is no research that really says that by only giving them one type of task that they will learn better. However, there is research that says if we mix it up and give them a blend, a mixture of different types of task, then that will lead to more impact. And we'll talk about that later. This is John Hattie's his measure of influences. Let me just explain this a little bit because it looks a bit mathematic. So, for every type of influence, he has given it an effect size, a number. 0 is 0 learning. They learn nothing. Just by being alive in the world, without going to school, just by living, we can develop and learn, and we do. That's the yellow bit. But it's not significant learning, but we all learn. Kids that don't go to school, they will learn. Unfortunately, in the world, typically, teachers have more impact, but they don't have a massive amount of impact. Because 0.4 is the average influence of all of these that have been researched. So to me, it seems to make sense for us to use the strategies that are here and to avoid the strategies that are here. You can even go into reverse. Apparently you can unlearn. I don't know if the unlearn is a word. Maybe forget is a word. But there are things that schools do that take students back in their learning. Let me show you some examples. Okay, there are 150 in this list. As I said to you at the start, student expectations is number 1. There it is. Questioning is number 2. But it's not just questioning, it's questioning with this. Dialogic thinking. That means that they verbalize what they are thinking. So discussion is important. Here's the ability grouping towards the bottom. Right at the bottom, interestingly, I don't know about Portugal, but in Spain, and I know in France and Italy as well, traditionally, kids that go to school, if they don't pass all their exams at the end of the year, they have to stay back a year. Does that happen here? Okay, well, the research shows us that actually has a very detrimental effect on learning. And I would imagine it's because of this. Because if you've been told that you're a failure and you have to do it all again, then you're probably not going to feel good about yourself or good about school or good about learning. You might want to leave school. And if it happens twice, then forget it, I think. So actually, the countries that typically hold back their students are the countries in the Pisa Tests. And the Pisa Tests are the tests that compare the quality of education in all countries in the world. They're at the bottom. Because wouldn't it be great if those kids didn't have to wait till the end of the year to find out if they were failures or not? Wouldn't it be great that in September you said, hang on, you haven't quite got this, I'm going to help you? That would be great, wouldn't it? It doesn't happen in some schools. Summer holidays. Early years, primary teachers, surely when the kids come back in September, I'm sure you pull your hair out, because what happened in June, they could do all this stuff, and they come back, and it takes them a while. Languages. Does it happen to you when you haven't spoken a language for a while? It's kind of gone. It comes back, but it takes a while. It gets rusty. Okay, so there we are. Let me put some numbers on this for you. Okay, effect size. Massive, 1.44, highest of all of them, off the scale. So this afternoon, we're going to look at how we can raise that. Okay? Second one, massive, questioning. We're going to look at that now. We're going to look at what they would call formative evaluation. I've called regular progress checkpoints, but responding to them. That means in almost every lesson, we do a quick check to see how they've got on, and where they haven't done well, we help them. And where they have done well, we give them something else to do. And feedback. Okay? Okay, so there they are. They are the 5 focus points that I mentioned. And in my opinion, and I think I know this, all of these will have an impact on how you evaluate or assess your children, how you plan the teaching, and how you teach the lessons. And I think that is cyclical, because when you teach and you evaluate, then you plan accordingly. And yet, in many schools, the planning is done before the year starts, and it doesn't change. But things do change during the year, and I'm sure you adapt your teaching and you change things as the year goes on. Some schools don't; they just carry on regardless. So, and I put evaluate at the top, because again, really, we shouldn't be planning our lessons if we don't know what our children can do or not do. Surely we should find out what they can do first and then plan for them. And yet in some schools, you inherit a group of children, but you don't inherit any information about them. So you have to start from scratch and find out. Wouldn't it be lovely if there was a continuum there? Okay, so moving on then, we're going to look at questioning techniques. Before we do, when we get back after the break, I'm going to give you a copy of this. This is a rubric. We call them rubrics, as I think you know. So kind of descriptors of the 5 focus areas for today. And I would like you to use this rubric for yourselves. Just read it and decide where you think your teaching fits on this sheet. So do something a bit like this maybe. So just find the phrases that you would say at the moment best describes you. Yeah? Because then that might give you, or should give you, an idea of how or which ones you would like to work on. Because we know these are all important. So if you know the ones that you would like to make even better, then we can do that. So I've got the rubric here. You don't have it yet. I'm going to give that to you after the break. And you do that in your own time. You can do it today, or you can do it another time. But I just really, it's for you to reflect. Okay, we've got 10 minutes before the break, so I'm going to use those 10 minutes just to start talking about questioning techniques. And I have a question. To ask better questions, or to ask questions better? That is the question. Okay? And the answer is both. We can ask better questions, and we can ask questions in a better way. Okay? To show you what I mean, I'm going to use one of my favorite films. I don't know if you've seen this. I'm not suggesting if you have or haven't seen it that maybe younger people haven't seen it because it's a 1980s film. My kids have seen it. This is why it matters to ask questions in an engaging way. This is how not to do it. It's called Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Hands up if you've seen it. Okay, about less than half. Ferris Bueller is a high school student that hates school and he decides not to go to school on this particular day, and he has a fantastic time doing other stuff. I would recommend the film if you haven't seen it. I'm going to show you a minute of why he does not want to go to school. Okay?
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? A tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which, anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer Curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
So you can see why Ferris didn't want to go to school that day. I've seen that many times. Actually, because I kind of know it off by heart now, and I know all of his questions. If he'd asked the same questions in a slightly more engaging way, the questions themselves might have not been that bad. But it's just so boring, isn't it? And so we can ask questions better. Typically, in schools, we ask children to put their hands up. I'm sure this is something that you've heard before, lots of you. Here we have this girl who is very keen to answer. Do you think she knows the answer? Perhaps, but maybe yes, maybe no. If she does know the answer, how does that help the others? Does it help the others? Does it help her? Has she learned anything new? Have the others learned from her? What about the other two? Do you think they're working? Do you think they're reflecting on the question? Thinking? I think she's picking her nose, but do you think they're bored? We don't know. We can speculate. But what we do know is that there's not much learning going on, actually, when we analyze what's happening in those lessons. These two seem to be passive. This one might get frustrated if she doesn't answer the question. Typically, when they do put their hands up, certain individuals dominate the conversation. So, and teachers don't think that's the case, by the way. And yet, if you actually do a tally chart of how many questions are answered by how many students, you'll find that the more able students generally are the ones that answer the questions. But there are some that might be shy and not want to answer the question. And there are some that can't shut up. But in any case, this creates a problem. So if you go away today with nothing else, my practical advice to you is not to use hands up. Because generally teachers use hands up because they think it maintains, and I guess it does, maintains order. Otherwise they'll all speak at once. Although quite often, actually, they won't. If you ask a question, and just like I would not expect you to put your hands up now to answer my questions, because we will, in an orderly way, we can listen to each other. There are different ways that we can do this. Typically, you'll see more in primary lessons, mini whiteboards. You've got one today, you've got a whiteboard each. This is one of our schools. It's a maths lesson, and there was a question. Why do you think that could be a more effective strategy for learning? The teacher has asked a question, and they are all showing their answers. So how does that help learning? Everybody gets a chance. Everybody gets a chance. Thank you. Identify misconceptions. Yeah, because if they're all getting it wrong, that used to happen to me. I used to use these all the time, whiteboards, and quite often I thought I'd taught a good lesson, and then I'd ask them to do an activity like this, and thought, oh gosh, they've not learned anything. So it can help with misconceptions. Maybe they haven't understood, or they've got something wrong. Why? Why more confidence? Okay. Okay. Are there any problems using these boards? What? They might not know the answer, or they might not want to participate. So is there a way around that? Ask them if they'd like to, or create a culture where it's okay not to. But at the very least, the teacher is able to see at a glance how many students have understood, and that's a progress check, isn't it? That's one of the ways that we can check on progress. And at the very least, they are all taking part all the time. It's not one person answering, they're all answering. Even better if you get them in pairs and say, well, discuss it together, decide on the answer, and then hold it up. As we would often say, think, pair, share. Or in groups. There are lots of ways of using the whiteboards. Today I'm using the show me cards, green and red. We've already used them. That gives me, I still remember the tables where we had a mixture of green and red, so I need to help those and support them to find out the name of that character by the end of today. Again, it's just a silly way of getting them all involved. And if you don't have cards, you could use pen or pencil, or you could use left hand or right hand. Hands up if is a good strategy. Typically, you'll see name sticks being used in classes. Advantage there, of course, you can take out a name, and that's the person that answers. And the children don't know who the next person will be. And you can then either take that one out, or you can put it back in, so they could get asked twice. Have you seen this before? Name generator. I've got it open on my computer. Let me show you. This is very simple. If I just stick that up, there we go. So we could just put some names here. Let's say. Okay. There we go. You put the names in, and let's just go to the fruit machine. Sorry, that was a bit loud. Okay, so Sam, you would answer my question. So a question for you, Sam. Let's ask a very difficult question. Okay, so I told you I'm a football fan, and Liverpool won the Champions League this year. Who's going to win the Champions League next year?
Liverpool.
Okay, Again, hold up your green card if you agree, and your red card if you disagree. Oh, I think we're in a minority, Sam. Okay. So the point I'm making here is there are ways that you can make your teaching more engaging by asking questions in a more engaging way. And yet, typically, teachers don't do it. I'm not saying here in Nobel at all. I'm just talking in general terms. Other ways of asking questions which can have significant impact. So we've talked about no hands up. There we are. We've talked about those 4. Other strategies, you might ask a question and say, we're going to do ping pong. So I ask Anna, I ask you a question, and then Anna says ping pong, and then names somebody else in the room. Who would you name? Another teacher. Joanna, where's Joanna? And then Joanna. Then Joanna, you would then answer a question, and you'd say ping pong. Who? Ping pong Isabel. And then I'm going to establish a condition now, and I'm going to say, Isabel, you're going to choose the next person to answer, but it has to be male and on a different table. Joao, where's Joao? Okay, now Joao, ping pong. You're going to say ping pong, and then you're going to it has to be female, different table, and not Portuguese. Sam? Okay. So you see what I'm doing is just getting the students to come up with who's going to answer the questions instead of me. Take it around the class. Well, maybe you have a question that doesn't have a right or wrong answer that you work on in groups, and you can build an answer between you and add different things. So everybody gets to answer. Or you give them the answer and you ask them, what do you think the question is? Students love that. You may know these online applications like Kahoot. Hands up if you know Kahoot. Okay, thank you. Has its advantages and disadvantages. Socrative is another one. These are just kind of engaging ways to ask questions and get mass participation. Yeah? Okay. So we're going to stop there. So far we've looked at research, what has an impact on learning, questions, and asking questions in a way which gets more people involved. And next we're going to look at the questions themselves, what kind of questions we ask. Okay? And we'll do that after the break. So if you could come back here to start at 11:30. I'm sure Portuguese are more punctual than Spanish people. When I say 11:30, they'll come back at 11:40. So what I say to them is come back at 11:20, and then we start at 11:30. But we need to start at 11:30 to get through the course. So if you could be back for then, please. Okay, thank you.